Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just broke down the Thursday night games that you're going to be able to see tomorrow with UNC Minnesota and Colorado against NDSU. I do have Minnesota and Colorado taking home those wins, but I think we're going to have some fun games on Thursday, no doubt about it. But let's get into UConn possibly joining the Big 12. This has been something that's kind of been bouncing around the Twitterverse the last couple of days, and something that is going to concern football a little bit down the road, but I do want to get into the idea of this and all of the different hurdles that could come up during these conversations. Because as we all know, as we've all kind of learned throughout this realignment world that we live in today, it does not stop. There's no world where these guys can stop, frankly, at this very moment, because guys like the Big 12 just have to stay alive. They have to try to keep up with the pack, and Brett Yormark is doing an incredible job of just throwing stuff at the wall. He's doing everything he possibly can to add value, to add revenue to this program or to this conference, and it's going to be really interesting to watch, what the next move is after this. This is something that has been kicked around a little bit for the Big 12. They talked about possibly adding Gonzaga a little bit ago in the basketball realm. It sounds like UConn was that next choice, and frankly, it's a really good choice. There's no doubt about that, and it'll be really interesting to watch this unfold, but obviously, there are going to be some hurdles in this process. There's no doubt about that. UConn is one of those teams that when you look at them in basketball and some of the other sports, you think of them as a great athletic department. Then you get to football and things look a little bit different, and that's kind of one of the big things in this is they would join in basketball and all other sports in 2026. So not too long from now, they'd be able to join. They do have to give the Big East 27 months to kind of figure out where they're going to land after this. So do have to wait a little bit here. But at the end of the day, they would join in everything except for football in 2026. Football would hypothetically come in 2031 if they were able to meet certain financial benchmarks throughout that time. And those are relatively unknown right now, but essentially just put more money into that program, get them to a place where at least they're relatively on the same footing as the Big 12. And there have been some complications, as you can imagine. With any of this realignment stuff, there's always some things that get in the way, and it's not just the presidents or the fans, because I know that there are some people that are against it in that realm, but it is the power brokers of the sport in a lot of ways. So one of the bigger ones is it sounds like Fox is not in on this. It sounds like Fox is not interested at all, and they just signed a deal with the Big East, so it's not surprising to see why they would not be in interest for this, because the reality is they signed a lot of that contract because of UConn basketball and because of what they did on the in the men's side and what they've done for years on the women's side. So I do think that's one of those things that you're losing a ton of money one way or the other. You're losing the asset that is the Big East in a lot of different ways because UConn is a huge name out there, but also having to restructure a Big 12 contract, adding in UConn, would be an outright nightmare and would cost a ton of money in legal fees and all of that type of stuff. So Fox is not much in favor of this. ESPN very much is, and it's for the exact opposite reason, because they don't have a stake in the Big East and they very much want one. So it's going to be one of those things that's going to be really interesting to watch, and we'll see which one of these two it wins out. And frankly, either one of them could, hypothetically, if enough money was, waved in front of their face, if I'm being totally honest. But at the end of the day, it will be interesting to see all of this unfold. And it sounds like the presidents and all of the people around these universities have been approached with this idea. It sounds like about 6 of them are in favor. At least CBS Sports has been able to verify. 6 are in favor of UConn joining, 2 are not in favor. And the 2 that are not in favor are honestly kind of right in this scenario, because the way that they're looking at it, at least from the two or from the stories that I've seen, is they're looking at it in terms of the playoff. They're looking at it in terms of how does UConn football, how does that program itself, how do they help us get better in terms of getting into the playoff more often. They would likely lower your strength of schedule. Even if you hit all those financial benchmarks, they would likely lower the strength of schedule for all of the teams that they played across the conference. It would likely put the conference in a place where they might even take a little bit of a step down in the national perspective because of adding a team like that. And on top of all of this, there are bills that have to be paid here pretty soon. And that's kind of where the rubber meets the road for the rest of, let's say, 5 years or so around conference realignment, where there are a lot of bills coming up that they don't know how much they're going to be, they don't know how they're going to distribute it, and they don't really know how the system is going to work around it. So I think it's one of those things that a lot of presidents are sitting there and saying, it would be great to have UConn in this conference. They would bring money, they would bring a little bit of revenue, especially on the basketball side, and would make you the best basketball program in the entire, or basketball conference in the entire country by a country mile. But at the end of the day, I think they're worried that you bring them in, you're cutting the pie just a little bit thinner. And those big time bills that are going to come on for revenue sharing and all of that type of stuff might just become a little bit harder to deal with. And then on top of that, you're not necessarily bringing in a football program that elevates you. You're not bringing in SMU. You're not bringing in Florida State or Clemson. You're bringing in a program that you have to kick down the road because they're not there yet. So it's not necessarily one of those things that I think is on the horizon. I think it is something that we likely will see at some point, frankly, if I'm being totally honest with you, just because that's usually how realignment works. When something is wanted enough by a group of people that are powerful enough, it tends to happen. But at the end of the day, there are a couple of hurdles, I suppose, before they get to the end line here. And obviously, the Big Ten would love to add Danny Hurley in that incredible program that he's put together the last couple of years. But frankly, I don't know if Danny Hurley would be too in on that idea of leaving the Big East, because that dude is Big East through and through. But at the end of the day, I think you look at this and at face value, it sounds a little ridiculous, right? UConn football being able to be in a Power 4 conference sounds a little crazy. Maybe they meet those financial benchmarks and look like a totally different program at the end of this. But overall, I don't see a world where they add this team and it boosts their odds for the playoff, where it really, really helps them get to that next level in the playoff conversation. So it's one of those battles that'll go back and forth. It sounds like private equity has not been involved in these discussions at all, and if they were to get involved, some things would get a little bit easier very quickly. I'll just promise you that. But at the end of the day, it's one of those that I think it would be cool at the very least, because I think the case study of a team saying, they're starting in 2024 or 2025 and they have till 2031 to essentially build up a football program. Now, UConn still has some good things going for them. Jim Mora has done a great job over there, but at the end of the day, there are leaps and bounds behind the majority of the Big 12 teams. So it would be really interesting to watch this unfold. If this deal goes through in the next little bit, and if UConn knows that they're going in as a football program in 2031, it would be fascinating year over year to watch this team just slowly get better or slowly not get better, because maybe the infrastructure is the problem, not the amount of money you're putting into the program. So it's going to be a ton of different things that kind of unfold over the next little bit. I tend to believe this has a couple more hurdles than some people think, and is going to be a little bit tougher to pull off overall, at least in the short term. I do think this is something that when you have someone like Brett Yormark kind of at the center of all of this, a lot of stuff is going to happen. He's a very, very intense, aggressive guy, and especially in the world of realignment, he's been at the face of it for quite some time, and I think he'll continue to be at the face of it for quite some time to come. So this is just another move in this massive chessboard that is conference realignment, and trying to figure out just how you elevate your conference's brand, you elevate your conference's revenue while not taking away from what your conference is, and not taking away from the possibility of your conference participating in a CFP or something like that. So it's going to be a battle. There's no two ways about that. I think there's going to be enough presidents, there's going to be enough TV executives that just don't love this idea, at least in the short term, that maybe some things need to change to figure out how this is going to work. And overall, when you look at the basketball part of this, it's an absolute slam dunk for the Big 12. Now, the Big East will do everything they can to hold on to UConn, but at the end of the day, they would be the best basketball conference in the country, and it wouldn't even be remotely close. They would have Arizona, they would have UConn, they would have Kansas, they would have Baylor. It would be outright ridiculous what they'd be able to do in terms of basketball. But on the football side, it's not necessarily the incredible powerhouse that you're hoping to add to the Big 12. I can promise you that. Maybe by 2031 they can figure some things out and really come in as one of the big boys, but as of right now, it looks like you're just hurting your strength of schedule in comparison to the big boys like the SEC and the Big Ten. But definitely something to monitor going forward. It's something that I will be watching very closely because, frankly, I love college basketball as well. So would love to see some type of matchup between UConn and Kansas in the middle of the season. But Also, there's the other part of me that says Big East basketball is a special thing, and I don't want to lose that. So it's the ultimate battle of conference realignment. It's been that battle since it started, and frankly, we're not done. And I don't know how close we are to done. I think the ACC is going to be the next big landslide, and we'll figure out where we stand from there. But this is just another chapter in a long line of chapters for conference realignment over the last couple of years, and this will be a very interesting one. I think it'll be a little bit more drawn out, but at the end of the day, I would be slightly surprised if UConn did not find their way into the Big 12 at some point. I do think it's going to take a little bit of time to get Fox on board and to get all the ducks in a row, but I tend to believe when enough people are behind one thing, it tends to happen in college football. So I expect that to unfold at least in some time in the next couple of years, but we'll definitely keep you updated as it all unfolds and as maybe Fox becomes a little bit more keen on the idea. But let's take a break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Week 0 just one more time. We're going to get into what did we learn about Week 0? What did we learn about Florida State, about Georgia Tech, about SMU? Not so great things about Florida State and SMU, and some really good things about Georgia Tech. But I want to break that down, and then some things that some people thought they learned, but maybe you didn't on Saturday. So we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.